Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the third match of the day for the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato. I'm back with Gabby. Gabby, you just had a really interesting game. Definitely one of those ones that shows exactly how important positioning can be in those long, kind of grueling mental matches.
And another game where Fire, Water, Grass core was the key of the switching. So you just gotta keep remembering those primary types. I think some people tend to rush through the starter Pokemon picking process, or maybe if you're me, you decide months ahead of time and you just kind of grab that Pokemon and run. But it's always important to keep that little flywheel in mind because you never know when it's going to be relevant on the larger stage.
Do not worry. Hop will tell me every time when my good type matchups are. So, really helpful for that after playing Pokemon since 2002. But, anyway, super excited. Of course, we have this third match. This is gonna be between Thailand and Malaysia. So, really interesting for us to see exactly what these teams are going to be doing. If we want to jump over to how the two teams are doing against each other, it's currently 2-0 to Thailand. So there's still plenty of room for Malaysia to get, to make up here, especially with a win today. Could put them in a nice position moving forward.
Not only just 2-0 in terms of the match count, also 2-0 in wins, with Sahapol and Papon winning over their opponents of Lim and Ismat. So, some pretty interesting teams so far coming out from both sides of the field. We have two Sun teams actually, and a Palkia and a Pelipper on the Thailand side of the field. But for this next upcoming match, I think we're going to be seeing some more interesting Pokemon picks. I think I saw at least one Pokemon on that preview screen that piqued my interest for sure.
Yeah, and I do believe that that is on the opposite side for Malaysia because with Thailand we have Narawitch, Naenna, and he is running Eternatus, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Suicune, Regieleki, and Volcarona, all of which a little bit more common meta picks and all Pokemon that I'm absolutely loving in the meta right now. You guys just looked at Volcarona for a very long time, so I think you're feeling pretty comfortable with exactly what Volcarona can do and how nice of a Pokemon it can be for Pokemon matchups like Xerneas, even if it wasn't fully successful there. So again, Suicune's another great Pokemon. Like you said, Fire, Water, Grass. There are, if you're looking at it, you've got two fire types here, but then you've also got the Rillaboom and the Suicune. And Suicune's a nice, bulky water type to have right now in the format.
Yeah, Suicune also gets access to Tailwind, which I think is going to be critical on this team as barring something like an Electro Web from that Regieleki, I don't think this team is going to really have much access to speed control. Also, shoutouts to the Eternatus being a really surprising powerhouse at this stage of play. And if we take a look at Narawitch's opponent's team, from Nasseruddean, it's going to have a really decent matchup against a lot of these Pokemon being featured that are not really that common at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Nasseruddean Fadhil is running Lunala, Incineroar, Stakataka, Araquanid, which we saw earlier in the match Jamie and I did, Tapu Koko, and Amoonguss. So, like you said, Electro Web on the opposing side of the field, but you've also got Electro Web from Tapu Koko. But most importantly, you've got Trick Room from Lunala, and Lunala is one of the few Pokemon right now that is running Trick Room teams, especially with Stack Attack, and you've got the Amoonguss that can go nice and slow, and Araquanid, which also does pretty well in Trick Room as well.
Yeah, looking at this team, and especially looking at the matchup against Norwich, I think that Nasseruddean is going to be bringing Trick Room with two Pokemon that can possibly set it up with the support from the Amoonguss, from the Incineroar. It's going to have a very favorable matchup against Norwich's team, which otherwise, again, will struggle with the twist of the dimensions. So, best of luck to both these trainers, as again, this is going to be a elimination round where the team that loses is got moving on in the tournament. So let's go ahead and get this lovely round of top 16 started.
I really didn't think I'd be commentating a match without Zacian, Xerneas, or Kyogre in it for the restricted, so it's nice to be able to see as well this Lunala. Lunala is a Pokemon I played with mostly in Ultra Series. I think I exclusively ran Rayquaza Lunala, which was not even all that common back then. But it's one of those Pokemon that, it gets access to Trick Room, but even you don't see it now because it's not really the kind of mode that you would run it with. It also gets access to Tailwind, which can be really nice. But you have two different restricteds here. You're not seeing the Power Herb on that Eternatus, so you kind of have to assume that it's not running that Meteor Beam. But the Lunala does run that Meteor Beam oftentimes right now in this format as well, Gabby.
It does, and I'm curious to see how Nasseruddean is going to lead in this match, because I think that he really has this pick of how he wants to take this game. On the one hand, you could lead something like Amoonguss and Stakataka or Lunala for the Rage Powder Trick Room setup. Lunala cannot be faked out as it is part of a Ghost-type Pokemon. You could also possibly lead your own Incineroar for some fake-out access. I think the only thing I can say for certain about Nasseruddean's side of the field going into this game is that Tapu Koko will probably be left behind. It just doesn't have a decent matchup against a lot of the Pokemon on Narawitch's side of the field, and it feels very much like the fast, powerful Pokemon that you bring once your opponent figures out, oh hey, they will be using Trick Room, I need to find a way to counter this.
Yeah, absolutely. But both of the leads here for Narawitch and Nasseruddean. Nasseruddean is going to be sending out Lunala and Amoonguss, like you said, so that nice Raid Powder Trick Room setup. And then Rillaboom and Suicune, so possibly something, Suicune not really going to want to set up a Tailwind in the face of this Trick Room, but maybe a nice way to break through that Shadow Shield Lunala has.
And also possibly could go for like maybe a Scald Burn on something. It's not necessarily the best matchup here, but breaking Shadow Shield on Lunala would certainly open things up for this Rillaboom to do big damage with the knockoff. But then you also actually, yeah, if you go for that, you can also ignore the Rage Powder from the Amoonguss since you are a grassy type Pokemon. But already Suicune revealing it has access to Snarl, which is a move that is very common in the metagame, but on Suicune, I've noticed some people actually foregoing it in favor of another move like Roar. So interesting to see it on here. Definitely going to start the game off right, though.
Yeah, Protect from Lunala, not going to be taking any damage, but showing it's not going to be going for that Trick Room either. Fake out into the Amoonguss, so Amoonguss not going to be able to use any type of moves this turn like a Spore, but the Snarl will be shown right off the bat for this first turn, making Nasseruddean a bit more cautious. Will go into that Amoonguss, do a tiny amount of chip damage, but it does at least show for Nasseruddean that he has to be pretty careful about the position of his Lunala.
I don't think the Trick Room is free anymore because of the presence of Snarl and Rillaboom on the field, and I think that it's what I'm curious to see from Nasseruddean is whether or not he will just attempt to go for it regardless. If he does choose to go for the Trick Room, Amoonguss could probably connect a Spore with the Suicune, and that'll certainly help him be able to reposition a bit better going into the later turns of this game. But you could also possibly switch in the Stakataka here if you do have it in the back of your party. You would still get the benefit of having enough health left for a Trick Room in the upcoming turn, and Suicune at that point would be put to sleep. If Nasseruddean decides to keep the Lunala on the field, it's probably an indication that the Lunala is not meant to be dealing damage in this match, but instead a switch indeed, but it's going to be Araquanid taking the field.
Yeah, and Araquanid takes that Snarl along with the Amoonguss, does get a critical hit for a little bit of style as it's not the most powerful of moves. The special attack drop too on both of these Pokemon, but a knockoff from the Rillaboom onto the Araquanid does a nice little chunk of damage, knocks off the Mystic Water. Amoonguss goes for the Spore into the Suicune, so Suicune will be put to sleep here. It is nice to show exactly what the item is, at least on that Araquanid, and will at least stop the power of some of those strong water type attacks for anything Narawitch has in the back.
Not too important right now, though, as the Araquanid probably wants to try and threaten the Rillaboom more than anything else with a super effective bug-type attack. The Spore onto the Suicune will make things a little bit easier for Nasseruddean to play through as this game continues, like I said, but it's still just a very passive position, I think, for both these trainers. And if Rillaboom's able to connect an attack with that Araquanid, that could really make things easier for Narawitch, but instead going to knock off and reveal the Akaberry on that Amoonguss.
Yeah, Akaberry, like you said, something you haven't seen too much in that last match, but we do see the Leech Life from the Araquanid, gets into that Rillaboom, gets a ton of HP back. Amoonguss goes for another Spore, doesn't affect the Rillaboom, possibly looking for a switch in there so that Rillaboom didn't have to deal with something like that Leech Life, but still a nice turn. This means that the Suicune could possibly wake up the next turn, though.
Suicune could wake up here, but it's going to still struggle with, dealing damage to both these Pokemon. And honestly, if the Suicune does wake up here, the Amoonguss on Nasseruddean's side of the field could just go for another Spore into that spot if that's something that he's worried about. Also could target the Spore again to the Rillaboom if he's concerned about a switch. It's really Nasseruddean's game at this point, as that sleep really shut things down for Narawitch.
Yeah, Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom into the Araquanid does a really nice amount of damage. A Liquidation from the Araquanid, so not another Leech Life, does still get it down almost to the bottom 25% of its HP with a Pollen Puff, boosting up the health of that Araquanid from the Amoonguss. So a really nice way to keep this Araquanid healthy. It's been able to get a bunch of damage off and pretty much stay almost at full health just based on the health from its partner Pokemon and that Leech Life.
It looks like the Pollen Puff actually completely mitigated the damage from Grassy Glide, so that's really good information for both these trainers at this point in time. And it really keeps this Rillaboom in a tough spot, can continue to deal damage to that Araquanid, but it's going to be able to heal either via the Pollen Puff or a Leech Life. And I think Narawitch just accepting that this Rillaboom's going to go down this turn so that he can get a safer switch in the next turn.
Yeah, Suicune gets that last turn of sleep here. Rillaboom goes for the Grassy Glide into the protected Araquanid slot, so Araquanid won't be taking any damage. Another Spore here onto that Suicune to try and predict that wake up this turn. So at least Rillaboom is back still on the field healthy, but maybe not the turn Narawitch wanted. Like you said, maybe to get a little bit more, a nicer, safer switch in, but the grassy terrain is now also off the field.
And as a result, we'll be losing the priority for Grassy Glide, but I don't think that's really a big thing to worry about here. Narawitch, we get the opportunity finally to focus in on some of these Suicune's attacks, since he has been clicking very quickly as there's not much it can do. This Suicune has access to Helping Hand, which is going to be a fantastic support move to help Grassy Glide deal more damage. It's just a shame that the grassy terrain is gone at this point as well.
Yeah, but Rillaboom still moves faster than that Araquanid, gets well over 50% of the damage off with that Helping Hand. Grassy Glide gets a Liquidation off onto the Rillaboom. Araquanid is so strong, though, a critical hit as well, able to knock that Rillaboom out off of the field and allow Narawitch to at least switch in something that may be better handled to equip it. But he is able to get a Spore off, put this Suicune back to sleep. So this Suicune really kind of just sitting here as dead weight. He doesn't even really need to target it right now.
He doesn't, and knowing that the Suicune has access to Snarl and Helping Hand as well, most likely puts Nasseruddean's mind at ease, as neither of those moves are going to be too punishing for these Pokemon. Snarl will lower Amoonguss' special attack, which I think after a certain point would affect the Pollen Puff damage, but it's not going to be doing a lot of damage to Suicune anyways, and Araquanid is a physical attacker. Eternatus, though, definitely a more powerful Pokemon in this position, does have access to Flamethrower to knock out that Amoonguss from this range, most likely. Also can deal big damage to the Araquanid. So a great pivot for Narawitch, as there is no threat of a immediate Trick Room on the field. He can finally go on the offense and take down this Amoonguss that's been causing him so much trouble.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is that Akaberry was knocked off, so this Amoonguss will be taking the full brunt of damage from this Flamethrower here, and that is not enough to knock it out, though. Gets it so close. If the Suicune went for a Snarl, it does not. It is still asleep. It will be asleep for this turn. Amoonguss goes for a Spore, though, onto the Eternatus, so that Amoonguss not getting knocked out by that Flamethrower is absolutely huge, because Narawitch now has two of his Pokemon unable to do anything.
That was such an important damage roll, and if the Suicune had woken up even a turn earlier, possibly either time, Amoonguss most likely would have taken that chip damage from Snarl. Nasseruddean, as a result, free to set up Trick Room this turn. Both these Pokemon are asleep. Even if the Suicune wakes up, it's not going to be able to stop Trick Room. And also pivoting in that Stack Attacka to deal some bigger damage moving forwards.
Yeah, the Snarl comes out here, at least breaks that Shadow Shield on Lunala, lowers the special attack of both of the Pokemon out here. Only really going to matter for that Lunala, though, as its Stack Attacka is physical. Lunala does get the Trick Room up. This will change the dimensions and put Nasseruddean, who's been able to really just wall all of Narawitch's Pokemon, into a great position moving forward.
I like the use of wall there, as there is a literal wall on the field, which will take some decent damage from a Scald from Suicune, to be fair, but at the same time, the Eternatus being asleep means it's essentially a sitting duck for these two Pokemon, and you know Nasseruddean wants to get that KO.
Yeah, the Stone Edge does hit here. It is not enough to knock the Suicune out. It is a critical hit as well, so a really large amount of damage. And then this Lunala will be able to move right afterwards. Suicune eats that Citrus Berry that we saw it was holding, gain a little bit of that HP back. Lunala goes for the Meteor Beam though, so it is showing it's holding that Power Herb. We'll charge this 2-turn move up in 1 turn. You just have to hope that it hits because it is not fully accurate. So you got to keep those fingers crossed for this entire move animation, I am sure. And it does avoid. Oh my goodness. Scald from the Suicune into the Stack Attack. I swear every time I mention that Meteor Beam might not hit, it doesn't, and that is the worst commentator's curse I could give. Plus the burn on the Stack Attack here, so a really lucky break from Narawitch.
You know, all Narawitch needs is, I think, the Eternatus to wake up this turn, and he's back in the game. That was some fantastic luck for him. Very unfortunate for Nasseruddean. The nice thing about Meteor Beam is it does allow you to boost your special attack up 1 stage, in this exact instance, mitigating a drop from that Snarl. But like you said, it's not the most accurate move, and even in a best of 3, if you're like on average gonna be fine, it really does hurt that turn it misses, given it would have KO'd the Suicune at that point.
Stack Attack switches out for Amoonguss. We got a little bit of that Regenerator HP back. Amoonguss Beam from Lunala, though. This will do a great amount of damage onto either one of these Pokemon, as Lunala is so strong. Into the Suicune, it's not enough to knock out, though, even with that +1 boost. Scald comes out here into the Amoonguss, and that is just a little bit of damage. No burn. Actually, a burn, though. Oh my goodness. What is Narawitch doing? He is rolling all of his luck buttons. Eternatus wakes up, goes for that Dynamax Cannon. Into either of these Pokemon, this should be a pretty comfortable knockout, I believe, especially because that Shadow Shield is broken. Actually, sorry, that Lunala takes that pretty comfortably here. Eternatus does lose some HP, revealing the Life Orb like we saw, and Amoonguss takes a little bit more burn damage. Oh my goodness, Gabby.
But Amoonguss is around to go for a second round of Spore, and I think Narawitch very correctly protecting the Eternatus this turn. Suicune will probably just be knocked out by the Lunala at this point, so Eternatus is the Pokemon that Nasseruddean would target if he decides to go for Spore. But, you know, that Lunala is at such low health, you have to wonder if instead of going for Spore this turn, you predict the Protect, and then you go for the Pollen Puff into your Lunala, so at least you can recover some of that health.
No Pollen Puff, though. Spore into the protected Eternatus slot, so that is really helpful here. Moongeist Beam will go into the Suicune. This will be enough to knock out that last little bit of HP that the Suicune has, so at least you still have the opportunity for Rage Powder and some really nice offensive moves in the next turn, especially now that Protect is over. You know, there is not too many turns left of this Trick Room as well, so Narawitch may have to be mindful and may possibly go for something like a Double Protect moving forward. Incineroar will switch in for Narawitch, will be that last Pokemon, which is a great have in front of Lunala.
Yeah, and because Incineroar is coming in this late in the game, you know, the Fake Out should mean that Eternatus doesn't have to roll a Double Protect unless Narawitch is worried about how much damage he's going to take from Lunala. At this point in time, it does feel like Nasseruddean is in a spot where he could go for a second Trick Room. You're down to your last 2 Pokemon. You're going to be taking a lot of damage from the Pokemon this turn, and then Sakataka comes back out and can possibly threaten a second Trick Room. So I think you do have to go for the damage. You just flinch the Amoonguss, know that you can knock it out the next turn, possibly even forcing it to use Rage Powder on its last turn to ensure the Trick Room setup. And then you are able to remove the Lunala from the field, which is really a very scary Pokemon to be staring down right now. It can do a ton of damage with Moongeist Beam, especially to a Pokemon like Eternatus.
Yeah, Amoonguss switches out, though, brings the Stakataka in, not wanting to take any flinch from that Fake Out and want to get some a little bit of that Regenerator back. So Stakataka will take that Fake Out. It is burned, so it will not be able to do anything this turn on that switch. And the Moongeist Beam, though, from this Lunala will target into most likely that Eternatus slot here, which it does. This Eternatus does take it pretty well. It will need at least one more of those to get knocked out fully. And it goes for its own Dynamax Cannon here into the Lunala slot, and that is going to possibly be enough to knock it out, and it is. So Lunala is now finally off of the field. You still have Amoonguss in the back who can switch in and help maybe to go for something like that Rage Powder and Trick Room, but the Stakataka doesn't have too much left going for it, and Eternatus also, you know, taking a little bit of Life Orb damage, so it can't get too many more attacks off.
The last Pokemon on Nasseruddean's side of the field, other than the Amoonguss, will be Araquanid, so given that and that alone, I think you have to set up Trick Room this turn. just because the Araquanid is going to be slower than the Incineroar, and depending on how these Pokemon are trained and depending on how much damage that Araquanid took previously, I think it took a lot. That is going to be super, super important to have the speed advantages so that Liquidation can just be an easy KO.
Yeah, Rage Powder from this Amoonguss, trying to keep its partner Pokemon safe for this turn. Eternatus goes for the Dynamax Cannon, though. Will target this Amoonguss instead of the Stack Attacker that I believe he originally wanted to target. So this Amoonguss will be taking a good amount of damage. It is enough for the knockout, so that means that this Flare Blitz that this Incineroar went into will be able to probably knock out the very little bit of HP that this Stack Attacker has left, and it will bring out Araquanid onto the field. Araquanid will be looking at a very low health Life Orb Eternatus, but mostly a full health except for some recoil damage Incineroar, even with a Liquidation inside.
Yeah, it's a very tough spot to be in, as this Araquanid will have to take 2 attacks before it will be given the opportunity to go for a liquidation of its own. And given that it is in the yellow, I don't think it will be able to take the Dynamax Cannon. I would love to be wrong, and this is definitely a great opportunity for some information for both these trainers, but Dynamax Cannon is just one of the most powerful moves in the game right now, and thanks to the lack of Dynamax, ironically, it's given Eternatus a really strong position in the Series 10 metagame, and also gave Narawitch the win in this Game 1.
Yeah, Narawitch had some extremely lucky Trick Room turns when he was in a position that wasn't very fortunate for him. You know, he had multiple 3-turn sleeps as well. So having that Meteor Beam miss and then that critical hit right after and getting the, just being able, or in the flinches and everything, getting himself pretty much into an Uno reverse kind of, now your turn, like good luck kind of situation where he's now able to put himself in a better advantageous position. And now that Meteor Beam is out of play, because like Geomancy, you're not going to really click it more than once per game. It's almost like those Z moves in a way from Ultra Series way back when. But just, incredibly lucky. And it's always tough when you have to cross your fingers for a move like Meteor Beam to miss.
Yeah, but when you put it into context, it does make things seem a little bit more rational in terms of just how much luck we saw on both sides of the field in that game. As we get started with Game 2, I think the big question that I have for for Narawitch is whether or not he's going to be making any adjustments. That Suicune, it did a decent job of those snarls when it got the opportunity to, but we really only saw it sit on the field asleep for, I would say, a majority of that game. Being able to adjust to a Pokemon like Volcarona may give yourself a better matchup against the Amoonguss overall, and that could mean it's a little bit easier for you to not be put to sleep that often. And in that game, those sleep turns were just absolutely key.
Yeah, and looking right at that Volcarona with our little look at the items, it is carrying that safety goggle. So if it isn't brought in this game and it does go to a Game 3, it could be a nice adjustment for Game 3, especially just having 2 Pokemon that can't be put to sleep, able to pivot in onto that Amoonguss slot. But, instead we are going to have that Regieleki is going to be that Pokemon, instead the adjustment versus that Suicune. We'll be able to put out more offensive pressure and maybe even slow things down with moves like Electro Web if it does get that opportunity to make sure that Trick Room is avoided. But the leads for both of these trainers now for this Game 2, exactly a Araquanid and Amoonguss here. So 2 interesting Pokemon to come out in the Rillaboom and Eternatus. So no Trick Room immediately, but having that Araquanid on the field's pretty scary.
We've also seen that Flamethrower on the Amoonguss without the Occaberry, assuming it is an Occaberry because we saw it revealed, did about 50% of its health. So the Eternatus, it might actually do more damage to the Amoonguss this turn if it goes for the Dynamax Cannon, ironically enough. But it looks like Narawitch happy to burn the use of that Occaberry immediately this turn 1. There's only so much Araquanid could do here. It could certainly do Leech Life damage to the Rillaboom. We saw it do that a lot, but given how powerful Amoonguss was in the previous matchup, I can see why Narawitch wanted to target it, and I can see why Nasseruddean immediately switched it out to protect it.
Yeah, this Stack Attacker will be taking a Flamethrower and a Fake Out in the place of what was that Amoonguss. So that Flamethrower does a really good amount of damage, actually, especially because of that Life Orb Eternatus. A Leech Life from the Araquanid, though, into the Rillaboom. We saw how much damage this did. It was so much from that Game 1. So this Rillaboom already a little bit in an unhealthy position here. But I doubt we'll be seeing sticky webs like Jimmy and I saw in that first match, so interesting to see exactly what Nasseruddean's plans are with this Araquanid.
It's an interesting spot for the Eternatus to be in as well, because you would assume that Narawitch would want to click Flamethrower into that spot for the Stakataka once again. And if you double it with the Rillaboom, you are essentially removing one Trick Room user from the field, but then you will lose your Rillaboom as a result. I don't think Rillaboom is too key in the matchup beyond the use of Knockoff, which just really paid off in dividends for Narawitch in that game 1. Also, Rillaboom is the only Pokemon that he brought, I believe, that cannot be put to sleep, so losing that here could be a really tough trade for him.
Yeah, Grassy Glide, though, will put this into range of a Flamethrower from this Eternatus. So like you said, at least one Trick Room user off of the field, showing what Narawitch is prioritizing for his win con here. But it will allow this Araquanid to do more damage, will allow it to be able to take out this Rillaboom, get that Leech Life, you know, if it had any HP loss, it would gain some back here, but that Araquanid just sat pretty comfortably for both of those turns, able to get that damage off, but the Eternatus is still pretty healthy here.
It is, and one more turn of grassy terrain recovery should bring it back up to full health. It's really nice that it's only been taking damage from the Life Orb recoil over these past couple of turns. But now that Rillaboom is gone, it looks like the Lunala making an appearance for Nasseruddean will be great timing for it. It's in another situation where a Trick Room, I'm not sure if Dynamax Cannon plus an attack from this Incineroar will do enough damage to pick up the knockout on it. And again, thanks to the Shadow Shield as well, it's just going to be such a bulky Pokemon here. And Araquanid, as a result, probably not the top of the list of Pokemon that Narawitch wants to target this turn. Could go for a Liquidation into that Incineroar for big damage, but looks like Nasseruddean, realizing how much danger Lunala is in, has decided to play things a bit slower for this turn.
Yeah, Lunala protects and Araquanid actually switches out for Amoonguss here. Dynamax Cannon into the Lunala will not connect as well. Incineroar goes for a Throat Chop, revealing that Dark type move of Throat Chop, but that means that this Amoonguss came in here for free. It's going to be able to Rage Powder and possibly go for a Trick Room next turn. We do have 2 Fire type moves for the Amoonguss, at least to be able to knock it out and prevent that, but that Trick Room is pretty likely to go up.
It is, and that's going to be great for Nasseruddean, as that Trick Room is, again, a really key portion of his win condition for this matchup, on paper at least. I think that Narawitch is in an interesting position where he could try and go for the Flamethrower into the Amoonguss again. And I kind of like how he's playing this, you know, just recognizing that, yes, Rage Powder Trick Room would be pretty bad. But, you know, in game 1, I was put to sleep for so many turns. It will probably be easier for me to stall out Trick Room if the Amoonguss is gone. And my 2 Fire-type moves are the perfect way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Amoonguss does have its Aqua Berry, was not knocked off, but it will get eaten up for this first Flamethrower from Eternatus. The Aqua Berry, of course, will help mitigate that, but I don't think it's going to be able to do all too much with this Flare Blitz from the Incineroar. So Incineroar going to do a really good amount of damage, able to at least knock out that Amoonguss, so it won't be able to be a problem during the Trick Room turns and redirect and protect its partner Pokemon, and most importantly, get Pollen Puffs back up for, you know, aiding its partner Pokemon if they take any big damage. But the Trick Room goes up here like we expected, will at least put Nasseruddean in a better position to maybe get an actual Meteor Beam off and connect with one of these Pokemon.
I think Meteor Beam is going to have to connect with Incineroar this turn, because knowing Incineroar has Throat Chop really puts Lunala in a lot of danger. The Araquanid, like, Liquidation plus the Meteor Beam from Lunala into the Incineroar will be enough to guarantee a knockout, and that will mean that Narawitch only has access to 1 attack this turn. And 1 attack means Shadow Shield will be in effect for 100% of that damage. It's a really tough spot for both these trainers to be in, because the Incineroar is such a key Pokemon in this matchup, especially knowing that Nasseruddean is down to his last 2 Pokemon. I'm not surprised that Narawitch wants to keep it safe, but at the same time, you know Regieleki's not going to be sticking around for that long. We might just be in the same situation the next turn that we were at this one.
Yeah, Araquanid goes for the Liquidation into the Regieleki here. Regieleki's holding that Focus Sash, so we'll at least be able to take 2 attacks from these Pokemon and time out this Meteor Beam at most. So at least with this Meteor Beam being off of the field, Incineroar is in a little bit of a better position, even though Liquidation isn't super helpful. I have to assume Meteor Beam hits this time. If it doesn't, Gabby, I might have to leave. I don't know if I'd be very comfortable with it. Yeah, so Meteor Beam does connect. So I would have felt terrible if it didn't. Does get that one last HP point from that Regieleki. So, I mean, it's a tough move to waste on just 1 HP, but that was the Pokemon slot that you did need to knock out, even if that Incineroar is off the field. But Grassy Terrain also disappears.
So no more recovery for any of these Pokemon as both trainers are down to their last two. Incineroar's Fake Out is really key this turn. Can only connect with the Araquanid, but as a result will open up the opportunity for Narawitch to target either of these two Pokemon down with the Eternatus. Knowing that Dynamax Cannon is your move of choice in this situation, I think you just attack into this Lunala. You go for the big damage. You recognize that this is the Pokemon that is ultimately going to be the troublemaker, especially now that it has that +1 special attack boost. A Moongeist Beam into the Eternatus is going to be doing so much damage. You have to try and retaliate to make up for that.
Yeah, the Fake Out into the Araquanid, like you said. Moongeist Beam, though, will be going first because of this Trick Room, so this Lunala is able to get that damage out very beginning. And the Eternatus does take a ton of damage from this, especially with that +1 boost from the Meteor Beam and no Snarls this turn. Dynamax Cannon will go out into the Lunala, though. It will at least break Shadow Shield, does a really good amount of damage even through the Shadow Shield. It was a critical hit, which does make sense, but most importantly, more life orb damage loss and no recovery now, so that Eternatus is really on its own timer.
It is, but a interesting choice for Narawitch. Does have access to protect this turn, but completely forgoes it in exchange for some damage. I don't think this is going to work out.
Yeah, I think that was a really risky play to not protect here. That Liquidation was enough to knock out that Incineroar. So this Moongeist Beam will very comfortably bring this game 2 into Nasseruddean Fadhil's favor. And that is going to at least bring out a game 3 here. But, you know, I feel like a critical hit to boot, of course, just for fun, I think, at this point. But I think the Regieleki was an interesting move just to be able to sack and get a little bit more of an Intimidate off onto that Araquanid here. But I think that makes it a little bit tougher because, you know, you're still not able to really take care of this Araquanid. You maybe brought the Regieleki to help, you know, get some super effective damage off, but it wasn't really... It was a tough end game there because he wasn't able to time out that Trick Room, and I feel like if he went for the Protect and went to kind of stall out the rest of the Trick Room turns, he could have been in a great position at least to, you know, maybe get some attacks off first.
I mean, it's worth noting that the Incineroar didn't have access to a Protect of its own, so there's only so much stalling it out in that instance would have done. But still, I think that this is just how this game is going to have to be played moving forwards for Narawitch. You know, this has been two games where Nasseruddean has relied on Trick Room. In game 1, there was a lot of bad luck everywhere, but you still ended up to turn up on top because of that Meteor Beam miss. In game 2, it just was played so differently, and the Regieleki adjustment as well really meant that Narawitch struggled to find damage under Trick Room. So going into game 3, you know, I like the idea of adjustment. I like the idea of switching up the Pokemon, but I don't think you bring Regieleki to a Trick Room fight. It's just not that Pokemon that you want in that instance, unfortunately.
Yeah, it felt a little bit more just like a punching bag there. That Focus Sash at least allowed it to take those 2 attacks and, you know, stall and got rid of the Meteor Beam off of there. But like you said, Incineroar doesn't really have any sort of protect option, so this Incineroar had to switch out. You didn't want to lose it so early on, especially with access to Throat Chop and, you know, just that Dark type move that can do that super effective damage to Lunala. But you know, I think the Suicune was at least better to take those bulky hits, and it just had to sit on the field and get put to sleep because there wasn't really much that, you know, he was able to do about it. And even if Tailwind isn't really a move of choice, at least having Helping Hand, like we saw, and Scald for a possibility of a burn can be pretty nice, especially with something like a Stack Attack on the field.
And also Snarl. I mean, we saw that Snarl break Shadow Shield on that Lunala in game 1, and also it can get the special attack drop to mitigate the boost from Meteor Beam. It's a Pokemon that kind of struggles to deal damage, but the fact that it can sit on the field and does have access to Helping Hand really does make it a fine adjustment in this Game 3 situation. So best of luck. This is going to be a really fun game.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be a really interesting game here for both of these teams, especially with the adjustments that we have from both players. So Depending on exactly what happens with this, the Amoonguss and the Lunala are the lead, like in game one, like we saw. So once again, the option for an Eternatus, or sorry, for a Rage Powder Trick Room here, but the Fake Out and the Eternatus here with the Rillaboom, at least we'll be able to stop that Rage Powder for this turn and maybe allow for some nice Shadow Shield damage for Narawitch on his side.
Also would allow for some this is such an interesting spot to be in game 3 because we're very it's very similar to where we were in game 1, and the Amoonguss is really such a big threat here. You have to wonder how Narawitch is going to target into it. Like, will he go for the double like we saw him do in that game 2 adjustment? But if he does, then Lunala could just go for the safe Trick Room. I mean, even without the Amoonguss on the field, I feel like Lunala is in a very comfortable position to go for a Trick Room regardless. It's not like knockoff plus a Dynamax Beam is going to guarantee the KO onto the Lunala. So it's a tough position, but there's going to be an attempt on that Trick Room from Nasseruddean.
Yeah, that Dynamax Beam does so much damage to that Amoonguss from absolutely not having to worry about it. And the knockoff from the Amoonguss, not enough to knock it out, but it does get that Akka Berry off of the field. But most importantly, a Spore here onto this Eternatus will be able to at least, make that not be a problem for this Eternatus here. Eternatus is now asleep, won't be able to break through that Shadow Shield for the Lunala, and it will be able to get some really powerful Moongeist Beams off during this game.
Yeah, and if that sleep is anything like the sleeps we saw in game 1, it's going to be lasting a while, and that's just going to be really unfortunate to Narawitch. Fingers crossed we'll see an earlier wake up this time so that this Eternatus isn't bullied off the field while it's asleep, but Lunala that Spore connecting was exactly what that Lunala was hoping for this turn, and Nasseruddean really has to take advantage of it to gain an early. So it's going to be a tough matchup for both these trainers to win. And honestly, I really like how the Amoonguss switches out for Nasseruddean here, as that Spore is such a key component in this matchup. Keeping it safe will make things that much more difficult too moving forwards.
Yeah, but the knockoff is at least able to get that Power Herb off of this Lunala, who does go for a Moongeist Beam this turn into the Rillaboom slot. So Rillaboom does take that pretty comfortably, at least. It does less than half of its health as that Stack Attack is switched in, but it means at least that this Rillaboom was able to get that really nice damage off on this turn and make sure that this Lunala wasn't able, at least had that Shadow Shield broken and allow that Eternatus to stay around for a whole nother turn, especially with that grassy terrain health regeneration after being asleep with the Life Orb.
Yeah, I think that Narawitch has to copy a page from Nasseruddean's book here and keep this Eternatus safe until the Trick Room runs out. As tempting as it is to keep it on the field to burn those sleep turns to, have it wake up and then switch it out, it's going to be really tough, I think, for him to find damage without that Pokemon access to him, especially since we have the benefit of knowing Suicune is the last Pokemon in his party. We've seen these Pokemon struggle to do damage throughout these games already so much. If the Eternatus is knocked out early because it's asleep, that's going to be a really troublesome thing to come back from.
Yeah, Amoonguss switches in here, though, once again with that Regenerator ability, gets it close to half of its HP. Gyro Ball from the Stack Attack into the Incineroar slot, not very effective, doesn't do, does about a third of its damage here, but Eternatus wakes up and is able to get that Dynamax Cannon off. If this is into that Amoonguss, it should be able to knock it out, just because it did switch in for that Lunala slot. So this Amoonguss is now off of the field, which is huge, because now Narawitch cannot be put to sleep, and it, makes it a little bit more comfortable for him to be able to fire off these Dynamax Cannons into that Lunala when that Lunala is forced to come back on the field.
Also allows him to rely on a more traditional form of Trick Room stalling with the Protects on the Eternatus. He doesn't have to keep juggling, which Pokemon are present, which Pokemon are in the back of his party, which Pokemon can be put to sleep versus which ones that can't. He's free to just press that Protect button and have it stick, and I think that's going to be a bit of a mental relief as he tries to find his way through these next 3 Trick Room turns. The Araquanid reveal, though, from Nasseruddean will force, I think, this Incineroar off the field. Just because we saw Liquidation do so much damage even with the Intimidate in the previous game. It's going to be a guaranteed knockout at the Incineroar at this point. But looks like he still does have access to Fake Out for one turn. The big question is, though, how much damage will he be able to do in the meantime? And will it be enough to continue to stall through Trick Room? Because we haven't even mentioned the Stakataka yet, who traditionally does have access to moves like Rock Slide or Gyro Ball for big damage. Or Stone Edge, even.
Stone Edge, but Stone Edge is prone to miss, so Stone Edge does not attack into that Eternatus there. Eternatus able to go for that Dynamax Cannon because the Araquanid flinched as well, was not able to get any damage off. Araquanid takes a really good amount of damage here, gets it down to about a third or two, just under about 40% of its HP. So now that puts it in a great position, even though that Stone Edge miss is another unfortunate miss for Nasseruddean in these games. He hasn't had the best of luck, but Stone Edge isn't the most accurate move.
It isn't. And I think that going forwards, he might have to rely on something a bit more accurate, given that he really is on back foot, has the Pokemon disadvantage, has Araquanid within KO range from another attack from this Eternatus. Really all Narawitch has to do at this point is stall out the Trick Room and then make sure that the Eternatus returns to the field in time to deal that big damage. It's kind of nice that the Lunala and the Araquanid are at the point in their health where one move will be enough to knock them out. I think if Narawitch is able to deal about half damage to that Stakataka as well prior to Trick Room running out, he'll be in a fantastic position to win the game.
Yeah, Stakataka goes for a Gyro Ball into the Suicune, who very comfortably tanks that damage and shows that Stakataka, of course, has that Life Orb that we saw. The Liquidation also into the Suicune from the Araquanid. Suicune loving to take these not very effective attacks, eat its Citrus Berry, and just kind of sit here comfortably while it deals with these Pokemon firing attacks at it, and it can take some more of those. Incineroar goes for a Parting Shot into the Stakataka, going to weaken the Stakataka a little bit more with that attack drop, and will, be able to allow for a switch in here for Narawitch. So Narawitch can at least bring in either the Rillaboom or the Eternatus, both of the Pokemon that he has on the field. And the Stakataka is probably not going to want to take any of the damage here, but mostly the Araquanid. The Araquanid not able to go for something like a Lunge or a Leech Life, onto the Rillaboom in the next few turns.
Yeah, and also I think Eternatus is the only Pokemon left on Narawitch's side of the field that does have access to Protect, and if I've been counting my Trick Room turns correctly, I think this will be the last turn of... never mind! The Trick Room is over, so that switch was perfect timing. I mean, it was great. Yeah, it was great timing regardless, just because, you have the Eternatus on the field, you can protect for one turn, and then everything's going to be all right. But the fact that that was exactly when Trick Room ran out will allow Narawitch to double into the Stakataka this turn with both of his Pokemon and bring it down to just the Lunala as a Trick Room setter. And that is a really great spot for him to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. A great spot. That Flamethrower brings it down to under 50% of its HP. The Scald is enough to take out that Stakataka as well for Narawitch. So it is now just the Araquanid and the Lunala. And Araquanid goes for the Liquidation here into the Eternatus slot. That is going to do a pretty good chunk of damage. Does not bring it down to under half of its HP, though. So now Nasseruddean isn't in a really comfortable spot to set up Trick Room again, because that Shadow Shield should already be broken. And, there is no way for that Araquanid to really redirect any of those hits.
If Narawitch was a little bit worried about the Lunala at this point, I think you just go for Snarl. Or Helping Hand even. That Helping Hand Dynamax Cannon should be enough to knock out that Lunala. Lunala could protect this turn, but like we saw, that Liquidation is going to be a 3-hit knockout on the Eternatus at this point. So Narawitch really is just cleaning up these remaining Pokemon, keeping him from winning the game.
Yeah, Eternatus has that Helping Hand Dynamax Beam right here, and that is going to be, Dynamax Cannon, and that is going to be enough to take this Lunala out. So Lunala is now off of the field. That is his biggest threat from these Pokemon. Nasseruddean still has this Araquanid, but it is not in a great spot to be moving forward. It can't do any super effective damage, really, to this Suicune, who can kind of deal with it. Eternatus still has enough HP to get one more attack off with that Life Orb, and any sort of Helping Hand Dynamax Cannon here is going to be really nice to just be able to take this Araquanid off of the field. The battle is forfeited, though, so that means that Narawitch is the winner for this match, and that puts another point on the field there. So really nice adjustments from game 2 to game 3. Again, I loved the Lunala as the choice because it was able to come in, take hits, but then continue to take hits, which is really helpful, especially when you're trying to work out. That Regieleki really just sat there just to take 2 hits, and that was it. So it was nice to have the utility of the Snarl, especially, and just the bulkiness of Suicune.
Yeah, it was really well played for both these trainers, and I think Narawitch did a really good job in this matchup, showcasing how you handle Trick Room when you're running a team that doesn't necessarily have a hard stop to it. It's certainly a risky way to play, but the fact that he was able to, even in game one when his Pokemon were put to sleep for so long, just sort of sit on the field, wait out the 5 turns, and then position himself so that he could go on the offensive once Trick Room was over, is really sort of the essence of how Series 10 trainers are stopping Trick Room. So very well played. I loved Nasseruddean's team. Having the dual Trick Room setters is usually the best way to get around that from like the Trick Room user side of things. But unfortunately, just could not really find that positioning in that game 3 and just didn't have the time to utilize that Trick Room.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great game 3 and adjustments. However, we will be back with more games. We are going to take a short break, so do not go anywhere.